As they walked away from the bar, Costello asked to hold Spencer's hand. He told her he was in love with a woman he could never have and needed a platonic closeness. Spencer captured the pain and confusion inflicting Costello. She saw he wasn't existentially in the same plane as her. She knew she could explain to Tal why they were engaging in this human connection. As they walked, Costello thanked her for being the first guest from his mind who offered him solace and allowed him to be vulnerable. His entire life he dreamt of sharing his vulnerability, while every aspect of his life demanded his perfection and growth. Even Grans, his touchstone, embodied an industrial revolution about him. Full of love, but always nose to the grindstone. This interaction with Spencer reminded him of the purity he felt with Jenna. Maybe it was best to let Jenna control the voices. He told her she was the first of the voices to bring down his anxieties. He said he would go anywhere with her. They turned a corner, and within 50 yards he saw his landing zone. Was she taking him safely to Hellas Liquor, to where he would call a car and go meet with his imaginary guests who challenge his psyche? He stopped dead in his tracks and refused to move. He explained his original itinerary. She assured him he didn't need to call a car and he could stay safely with her. He said he needed to gather himself and would meet her at the store. She very bluntly told him her friend Tal would be joining them. After observing his bizarre behavior, she cleverly told him Tal would be even more in favor of him joining them for a peaceful and communal evening, rather than going home alone to the demands of those waiting for him. Costello's cardigan wasn't sufficient for the Seattle weather. He was visibly shaking from the cold. Spencer waved Tal over and told him to let Costello wear his hooded sweatshirt. Without question, Tal doffed the garment and helped Costello put it on, even pulling the hood over his head to warm his ears. Tal uttered his first words to Costello. "Very pleased to meet you, my friend. Spencer has the best judge of character, and I know this Seattle weather is a shock for an Angelino. The least I can do is offer my sweater. I dropped a $20 bill in a crosswalk, and a stranger returned it to me. I'm a firm believer in paying it forward, so you're up next, brother." Spencer quietly mentioned to Tal that her new friend was visiting from Los Angeles. They became the first and only two people out this evening who knew this little bit of information about Costello. Costello held back and admired the mural he fell in love with, but this time from afar. Spencer kept an eye on Costello as he stood frozen. She almost sensed him building a fire inside himself, a confidence he'd been holding back. She met Tal in Hellas Liquor, where they gathered the items he failed to get during the day. They also bought a bottle of hydrogen peroxide and dressing. As they continued to shop, they both couldn't help but notice Costello performing an odd form of yoga or prayer in front of the mural. They waited and watched as he continued. After a couple minutes, he stopped. They gazed at each other and knew they'd found the ideal witness for tonight's ritual. They exited the store without interrupting Costello out of respect. Shortly after they passed, it dawned on him to follow. He fell in line, and onward they went to Spencer's loft. Costello was gravitating towards a darkness he found peace within. His eyes looked deeper, as though he no longer concerned himself with the Jeep. His stride had a purpose, displaying a sense of fate that ensuring he would ultimately and miraculously make it to the hotel safely. He was entirely outside of reality, except this time he had no recording device prepared to view his actions tomorrow. The depths of this evening overshadowing his research. Spencer calmly turned back to observe Costello's behavior. He was picking up speed and most certainly in tow. They neared Spencer's loft. A shortcut took them through an adjacent apartment parking complex. As they navigated through the complex, a small SUV raced through, just as a man was returning from a jog. The SUV struck the jogger. However, just gracefully enough, no one was injured. Spencer and Tal engaged in a quick intervention and found no reason to stick around. Costello ran up to Tal and asked if he was okay. He seemed to think Tal was involved. He also bizarrely felt responsible. He repeatedly blamed himself and asked how he could help. After calming Costello, they continued their walkabout to Spencer's and finally arrived. She had a small studio above a garage. Costello hesitated for a moment and sobbed quietly. Spencer embraced Costello and gave him a quiet motherly shush that settled him. He again placed blame for the very minor accident on himself. She told him people do at times just forgive others, even when they hurt one another. She felt Costello becoming listless and knew they didn't have much time left with him. Her charisma gave him a boost and encouraged him up into the loft. Spencer's loft was quite a sight. There were no secrets. It looked like a retreat for any wayward coven. Costello was unfazed. He stepped through the threshold and asked for a drink. Spencer set the fresh bottle of Bordeaux down on the counter and uncorked an already open bottle. He was so oblivious, she could have poured him Hawaiian punch and he wouldn't have known the difference. Without wasting any time, Tal selected the athame for the evening and pierced his right hand, dragging the double-edged blade across his hand. The blade was so sharp the skin barely filleted. Blood rushed to the top layer of dermis and he wrapped it with dressing. He walked over to Spencer and Costello and asked for a pour of his Fernet. Spencer insisted he drink from the same bottle of Bordeaux. "We don't want our new friend thinking we wouldn't give him something we wouldn't all drink from," she said. Tal replied, "Very well, mi amor. Por mi vaso con vino." Spencer poured 3 glasses, and Costello jumped right into a toast. "Here's to a shared fear of dying alone, holding down the bourgeoisie, and your latest lascivious desires." Spencer and Tal shared a look of approval and simultaneously said, "Blessed be." Costello looked across the room at a sizable chest beautifully lined with red velvet. This was where Spencer kept her athames, runes, books, and mementos from her relationship with Tal. He asked why she had a casket in her home. They all got a laugh and carried on, but Costello couldn't stop fixating on the chest. Spencer spotted his tunnel vision and gave him a simple explanation that the chest was for Tal and her to share moments. She asked if he needed any further details, and he seemed to lose interest. Spencer and Tal took their drinks and set their glasses down. Costello stood frozen, gripping his glass. Tal subtly slid the athame over to Spencer near a chopping block with old fruit and pita chips. She picked it up and drug it across her right palm, as usual, a bit deeper than Tal. Costello saw the blood erupt from her palm and gasped, nearly forgetting to breathe. "All those nights I've spent with you, never once did you threaten me," he growled. Tal began to speak and Spencer cut him off. "We have no desire to harm you, Costello. Tal and I simply want to share our bond with you as our witness. If you will cost just a small amount of blood from your right hand so we can join it with our union, we'll ask nothing more from you," Spencer calmly explained. "Are we all going to die tonight?" Costello asked. "Nobody's going to die, I promise you that," Spencer said. "Here's to a shared fear of dying alone." "Which one of you said that?" Costello shook. "You said that. It was a beautiful toast," Spencer told him. Spencer slowly moved in towards Costello. "Set your glass down so I can show you how to do this with no pain," she pointed to his hand. The closeness spooked Costello. He turned and ran. Spencer grabbed for him. As he fled the studio, all she did was drag her blood on Tal's hoodie and the shorts Costello was wearing. They let their witness go.